Welcome into another edition of the Fantasy Authority podcast. I am your host, Kevin Steele. Who always forgets to turn his phone off vibrate on the podcast. And anyways, we're back again for another week. It is week 14. It is fantasy playoff week. It is official. It is here. We have made it, which is both a good and a bad thing because that means we only have a few more weeks of football left, at least regular season football left. This year has flown by per usual. That's what happens every single year. And then we sit around and hate our lives and discuss and bicker back and forth all off season about which takes are right and which takes are wrong until the next year begins again. So here we are again. It is week 14, but I had a horrible week 13. Got booted from the old playoffs, which was brutal because I had the most points in the league, but I did not make the playoffs because this league is horseshit. And but it is what it is. How was your week?
It was all right, man. Talked a little bit before the pod started, and both my wife and my 1-year-old are sick right now, but I did make the playoffs in, I think it was 11 of my 15 leagues. So hopefully those don't end up being one and dones, and I can turn some of those into straight cash, homie. So that's the hope, man. But yeah, my DFS week wasn't that great, and my the little betting I didn't turn out too well either. But like you said, it's the fantasy playoffs. Another week is here, and time to move on, man. Can't keep looking in the rear view.
Yeah, forward-thinking show. So, again, you can find me on Twitter at FantasyRat13. My name is Kevin Steele, and my co-host, which I did not say, is Cody Kutzer. You can find him on Twitter at CKutzerFF. But if you are watching live, you can go ahead and drop any questions or, I guess since it is Tuesday night, you can drop any waiver questions you may have or start-sit questions for the illustrious Week 14 because the time is now, and we are hoping to lock up some fantasy championship, win some money. And if you have been kicked out or you get kicked out next week or the week after and don't win, jump in and play some DFS. DFS is a good time. And I've, been playing for the last, I think 5 or 6 years. I'm kind of a DJ now and I play every sport and NASCAR and hockey and MMA and everything else. It gets wild.
Jesus.
No, not hockey. I shouldn't say that. I don't play hockey, but NBA I do play. Anyways, but a couple of friends from home, they were talking about football yesterday, and I was like, "Hey, why don't you play some DFS?" And they all signed up. And they're gonna check it out. It's a good time. Don't have to worry about injuries and everything else. And every week is a new puzzle. So, if you want to do that, you can check out our DFS DJ Nation podcast that we do every week as well. So, anyways, let's just jump right into the week and some quick news and notes we have for this week. After Darrell Williams, I looked like, honestly, I thought it was an Achilles injury. Looked brutal. Turns out to be not as bad as what they think, but Andy Reid said yesterday that it would be a long shot to consider Darrell Williams to play, and David Williams, who's also banged up. So the Chiefs signed Spencer Ware today. I know a lot of people were upset because there are certain truthers out there who think that this was Darwin Thompson's season. Which, to be fair, I thought Darwin Thompson looked okay. It was it's the end of the game. It was mop up. I know the Raiders have taken out some of their starters, and I don't know. He went 11 for 44. People are acting like he went out and rushed for 120 or something like that. I think it was promising, and the Chiefs really haven't been able to run the football all year. But I don't know. I think some of the hype that he's gotten this week is a little bit ridiculous. And not to mention, they already have a running back actually on which I was surprised that they actually went out and signed Spencer Ware because they actually brought in Elijah McGuire last week, who they were really talking up and actually tried to sign him over the offseason this past year. He ended up going to the Browns practice squad because he has a relationship, I think, with the running back coach there in Cleveland. But the Chiefs ended up signing him off their practice squad and placed him on their practice squad. So I actually thought he was going to be the guy that was going to get called up, he showed some flashes with the Jets, but I think he would be a nice fit in this offense. And Andy Reid really talked him up last week about all the things he could do. So I was somewhat surprised that Spencer Ware got signed. But I don't know. I mean, what are your thoughts on Darwin Thompson?
Yeah, like you, I didn't get to see too much of that, but I saw all the Darwin truthers coming out and talking about how good he looked and explosive and everything else. And then I saw the 11 for 44 line, and I was like, was there something called back? Like, did I did I miss something? But I think this also goes back to preseason. You know what I mean? People see him in the preseason. He looks the way he did in the preseason. Now he finally gets his chance. Like it took injuries to both of Williams for him to get on the field, and they obviously don't feel that comfortable because, like you said, they went out and got Spencer Ware. So, I mean, and as soon as Damian Williams comes back, I mean, has there been anything about how long term Darrell Williams' injury is going to be? Because obviously that's just going to muddy everything right back up.
I think once it does, I think most likely once Damian Williams returns, I think Spencer Ware probably gets cut. I think it's just a short-term deal here, but yeah, I don't know. Like he's not somebody I'm going to run out and grab this week. Like they're not going to all of a sudden turn to him and give him some big workload. Spencer Ware can step right in. He knows this offense. Obviously, he's been here multiple years with Andy Reid, so he needs no time to get ready. I mean, he was just here last year, so. No, I mean, Darwin Thompson is not a priority ad or anything like that for me this week, or, somebody that I would even consider starting, in my opinion, now that they've brought in Spencer Ware. If it wouldn't have been, I might have considered it because if you know, like LaShawn McCoy, like it does not seem to be really in favor with Andy Reid right now because like he continually gets like limited opportunity. And they're really just kind of a three-way split with, and just same as it was last week. I mean, Darrell was getting a lot of opportunity, Darrell Williams, before he got hurt. So, yeah, this isn't a good situation for any fantasy running back right now.
Yeah, I mean, as far as waivers go, I would rather add Madison right now than Darwin Thompson. I mean, he would be the guy who I would be prioritizing this week, even though they came out and said, I mean, Dalvin said that he would be ready for this week, but there's really no reason for them to rush him back against what they have the Lions this week. And especially a shoulder injury like that. Like that's running backs are going to get hit 99% of the plays. You know what I mean? So that's just something where, and me and you were texting back and forth whenever that was happening. And, you could see Dalvin Cook laying on the ground just crying. Yeah, I mean, like, at least that's what it looked like to us. So, like, you got to figure if he went into that game with that shoulder injury, went down, he was crying, went on the sideline, like obviously didn't come back in. Madison is the one who I'd be adding right now over Darwin for sure.
No, I completely agree. I just don't think there's a lot there with Darwin Thompson. I honestly don't think that from just hearing Andy Reid talk in press conferences, it doesn't sound like that he's sold on Darwin Thompson, especially at his size. Like, I don't think he's somebody that he views as somebody that they would ever use as like a true feature back. So like, I just don't think that you can really trust that. And so if you can't, then, I don't think he's somebody that you want to roster, especially week 14 when you're in the playoffs, right? Like this isn't the time to do that. So I do think actually a good segue would be a question we just had. Any advice on San Francisco running backs? This is another tough situation to be in as well because, as we saw this week, Raheem Mostert, who really, exploded this week, had a really big week for them against a pretty good Baltimore run defense. And, it's like – I was never high on the Tevin Coleman thing anyway, because heading into the season, like we saw him last year in Atlanta, and when he had the backfield basically to himself and was like very meh. And then heading into this year, but this year, like this has been one of the best running situations to be in because they run the ball so much. But in my opinion, like I think Raheem Mostert is at least interesting because he is used as a pass catcher. Now, are we going to get got again like we do so often with these guys where you go and pick them up and think that these are the guys and then next week they get four attempts? Because we also still have Jeff Wilson is still there, Tevin Coleman, and then when is Breida coming back?
Yeah, for sure. I think something that was promising as far as that goes is the fact that they did basically just put Coleman on the bench. They just let Raheem run that, and outside of week 8 against Carolina where he had 4 touchdowns, he has only had over double-digit fantasy points. Tevin Coleman, this is 3 times all season. So he hasn't looked good. Mostert and Breida have definitely looked better and been more explosive and had those big chunk plays. I think Mostert is worth a stash right now. Got to figure Breida comes back and he gets involved. But this is one of those situations where I would stash Raheem, but I wouldn't be in any rush to start him next week, especially if Breida comes back. I mean, if they hold Breida out again, I definitely think you could start Raheem. But if all three are back and like Jeff Wilson, like you said, he's always in the mix to get one touch that he turns in, like what he had that game-winning catch just 2-3 weeks ago, something like that. So it's a mess, but I would stash Raheem. Wouldn't be in any rush to start him unless we get obviously the news that they're going to hold Breida out again, but he seems to be close to coming back. So Coleman is just gonna sit on your bench at this point. I mean, he might even be droppable.
Yeah, I mean, so because we're at the point now in the season where that like almost everybody is at least somewhat of a candidate to drop. Like, I mean, it depends on who they are, obviously, but I guess I should say like those mid-level guys like that, like Tevin Coleman, like you can drop Tevin Coleman at this point if you had to, and because I mean, what are you risking? You know, I mean, there's only a couple of weeks left. You pretty much are in, do whatever you can to win mode. Because there is no really next week for you. Nothing's guaranteed anymore. So I think now, like you truly switch to, in my opinion, that like where you kind of play this as like we say in DFS, like we've said in the past, like you play you just play high upside here, because that's all you're trying to do is get a W. I mean, looking at some of his advanced metrics, like he actually has been pretty solid this year. If you look at some of the stuff that he's done, I mean, he's number one in true yards per carry, number one in yards per touch, number 3 in breakaway run rate. So, I mean, he's been pretty, I mean, in terms of efficiency, I mean, it's everything you kind of want to see. And he's on a team who runs the second most run plays per game. So, and even his work, I mean, even his athletic metrics are pretty encouraging. I mean, he runs a 95th percentile 40-yard dash around 4.42. His burst score is 96th percentile. Agility score is 74th percentile. So, I mean, there's a lot to like here. The only problem is, I mean, he's 27 years old. So, I mean, I'm not expecting this to all of a sudden turn into something for next year. But, I mean, at least for now, like you said, if Breida is out, yeah, I mean, I think that I would view Mostert as at least a flex option this week.
Yeah, since that Week 8 game, Coleman hasn't had over 40 yards rushing in any of his games, and the most targets he's had all year is 4. So you can safely move on from Coleman, pick somebody up like the aforementioned Alexander Madison, and just swing for the fences and go upside. Because if you've made it to the playoffs, you haven't been counting on Coleman, so there's no reason for you to hold on to him at this point if there's someone that can give you higher upside on your bench.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen, and too, if you look at Mostert as well, like, I mean, the last week was the first week he's had over, the second week that he's had a snap share over 50%. I mean, he handled 66% of the snaps last week. The week before, he had 33% against Green Bay, but he did score double-digit fantasy points, scored 13.7. Basically because he had, he did find the end zone in that game. And then the week before, he also had played 51% of the snaps. But, and really, I mean, every time they've given him opportunities, really, he's produced well. I mean, if you remember, you go back to that Week 2 game against Cincinnati where he had 13 carries and he also had he received 4 targets, only played 44% of the snaps, but he had 24.1 fantasy points, which was his most that he scored all year. So yeah, I mean, like I said, I think he's at least a decent flex option this week.
Yep, for sure.
Okay, so another question we have: any consideration of sitting Mahomes for Tannehill, Darnold, or Minshew? No. So here's the thing. I get it because, honestly, Ryan Tannehill is actually what I was going to talk about, but I mean, we got the question now, so I'll go ahead and answer it. Ryan Tannehill has been a monster since he's really taken over, right? He's been strong. He's been QB7 over his last 5 games. He scored 10 touchdowns, 7 pass, 3 rushing. He's 6th in average depth of target, 6th in rushing yards, and 5th in adjusted completion percentage over the last 5 weeks. I mean, he's been solid, and he gets a great matchup against Oakland, so I get it. But the thing is that Tennessee is still a rush-first offense, and I don't think they're going to need to open up the playbook against the Raiders. And so I think that, with the way, especially the way Derrick Henry has been just eating the last the last couple of weeks especially. But I don't think they're going to really need to open up the playbook here. Like they're going to, I think the Raiders are toast, and I think that I could see the Titans hammer them as well. And so I think they're going to see a team that continues to run the ball. Now, the biggest question I think this week for a lot of people, especially with it being the first week of the fantasy playoffs, is what are you doing with Patrick Mahomes? People are going to be concerned with the Patriots defense, especially in Foxborough. And to be honest with you, Pat Mahomes hasn't necessarily looked like Pat Mahomes that we saw earlier in the year, right? He's not out there dropping 400 yards passing and 3 or 4 touchdowns. I mean, last week he only had 175 yards and a touch. I can tell you what my opinion on is. What is your thoughts this week on Pat Mahomes?
This is one of those ones where, I mean, we had the talk and debate earlier this season about, the start your studs kind of mantra. But this is one of those things where if I had somebody like Mahomes on my fantasy team, I'm not rostering a second quarterback. And I'm sure as hell not picking somebody up off the waivers and starting him. It's not a great matchup, but I mean, we've seen this New England defense kind of exposed a couple of times, and if there's anybody in the league that can do it just based on passing alone, it's going to be Mahomes. So, like with those other, the Tannehill would be the only one I would consider. Darnold's been too up and down. He's had a bunch of good games in a row. Then he had that absolute dud last week, and Minshew, like it's not like he has a great matchup either. I think they have the Chargers this week, so it's not like he's somebody like he's going up against like a Tampa Bay or somebody like that. So I mean, I get it with the matchup and with how well Tannehill's been playing, and I do like Tannehill this week, but I couldn't start any of them over Mahomes.
Yeah, so I'm in the same position, right? Like, or I'm in the same mindset. Like, if I was going to consider it, it would be for Tannehill, just because this matchup is so good, and if the Raiders are able to keep it close, you could see them throw more. Like, if you look at Tannehill's numbers, really since taking over, since I guess week 6, so I mean, he's basically put up 19, 19, 23, 16, the big, huge 32-point performance that he had against the Jaguars, and then 13. So, but for the most part, I mean, he's kind of giving you that 19 to 20 fan, which is fine. Like that doesn't kill you. Like you're perfectly okay with that. I just don't think that, like I said, like I don't think that you're going to see that unless the Raiders are able to come out and kind of turn things around and get the points on them. Like that's the only way it's going to happen, because I'm not concerned at all with that side of the football. But for me, like so my thing is with Mahomes is I think that he turns out to be like, I think this is a game where the Chiefs won. They don't need this game, but I think this is like a statement game for them, especially with last year losing twice to them, getting kicked out of the playoffs by the Patriots. If the Chiefs have any hope of getting a home field advantage, they need this win to at least have any hope with it, because they are tied with the Texans. So the Texans were to drop one more. And then depending on what happens with the Bills game with the Patriots. So this is a game that they need. But I feel like that we saw last week kind of a blueprint, if you will, on how you beat the Patriots, right? Especially with their defense, because they've been doing it all year. Well, you have to have speed to be able to beat that. And that's what the Texans were able to do last week against the Patriots. And the Chiefs have that. There's not a team in this league that has more speed than what the Chiefs do, right? Like Tyreek and McCole Hardman. I think you see a lot more McCole Hardman this week than we have on other weeks, to kind of open things up as well for Mahomes. And I think this is a monster week for Mahomes. I don't think you're going to see Mahomes throw for 175 yards. I think that had a lot to do with the fact of game script, that the Chiefs just went out and destroyed the Raiders, that he didn't have to throw the ball. And so, I mean, they were up 21-0 quickly because Derek Carr threw multiple turnovers. They had to pick 6. So like he just didn't need to throw the ball. So I'm running Mahomes because I think this is a week, like I said, that I think this is another week where we can see the Patriots lose again because I think the Chiefs have all the pieces to be able to beat them.
Yeah, for sure. I think this is, like you said, the speed aspect. This could also be one of those things where we see a bunch of, pre-snap motion and the pop passes that shouldn't really count as passes, but Tyreek or Harmon could easily take one of those and turn that into a 20, 30-yard touchdown. And, I think we see a couple more things like that. So, yeah, man, I would just roll Mahomes in that one.
So another question we got, who would you flex in standard scoring? Shark, Marlon Mack, is that? Yeah, Mack and Devin Singletary. I'm not. Is Marlon Mack? Is he going to be back this week? I know I read earlier. I think it was yesterday that they weren't really sure what was they were going to monitor him and check to see how his hand was. So,
yeah, I think I saw something where he was coming close, or not coming close, but he was at least practicing. But even if he does play, like that's still not a great matchup going up against Tampa Bay. Even though he has been running a decent amount of routes, he hasn't been targeted all that much in the passing game. Out of those three, again, Chark, Marlon Mack, or Singletary against Baltimore, I'm gonna go Chark there. With Minshew back, that was his boy early in the year. It's not a super difficult matchup, and Minshew's obviously in there for a reason. So give me Chark out of those three, even in standard. You thinking about Singletary?
That would be the other way I would go. Like I wouldn't mess with Marlon Mack even if he was healthy against this Tampa Bay run defense. It's been that good this year. There's a lot of studs that you don't really want to play against them. And so playing somebody like that, like I just can't do it. And so especially coming off a hand injury, even if he is back this week. So it really would come down to Singletary or Shark. It's tough because with the Chargers now have Derwin James back, and they also got, I believe, Adrian Phillips back in their secondary. So now that secondary is back to where you kind of want it to be. And so that's not as easy of a matchup as maybe you would have thought weeks prior. But I do think that I think that it's still probably DJ Shark just based on matchup. The thing that has me, because it's standard, that's basically where I lean with. Because you have Josh Allen out there who's running. I think he has like 6 or 7 rushing touchdowns this year. Who's kind of snipe away from that. Then you also have Frank Gore. So with it being a standard scoring, a non-PPR league, I would have to go Shark.
Yeah, Chark could. Easily get if Chark scores a touchdown. And gets 60 yards, something like that. Like Singletary getting 12 points, like as much as we like him and as good as we think that he is, like he's still disappointed a little bit, and he has to get it in chunk plays. And like you mentioned, Josh Allen is always gonna be there to take away some of those rushing attempts and Pappy Gore. So I think Chark's the play there.
I agree. Okay, so let's move on a little more of the news that we have here. Andy Dalton led the old Bengals to their first win of the season. You just love to see it, don't you? You just love to see it. Andy Dalton, comes back and dusts them off and gets a dub. So that was good to see. Good to see. And I think he is going to continue being the starter there. So I think that spells good things moving forward, at least for the last couple of weeks with guys like Auden Tate and Tyler Boyd. So anyways, it was good to see that. And then Austin Hooper actually resumed practicing today. So that was encouraging. And so he may actually be back this week, which he gets a pretty solid matchup against the Panthers. So, we kind of saw Jaden Graham last week, had a pretty good week on Thanksgiving when he had 4 for 44, I think it was, on a touchdown. But I think he left with an injury. So it sounds like Austin Hooper could be online to be back this week. So if you had him, you stashed him. If somebody decided to drop him, this is an excellent time to add him. And to be honest with you, if he was available in waivers because somebody decided to drop him because he got hurt, I would use a number one waiver ad or all the rest of the fab I have on him, because it is crazy. I was looking at it today. Despite the fact that he's missed basically the last 3 weeks, he is still tight end 5. That's how rough it is. The man misses 3 weeks and he's still a top 5 tight end. So, so with that, and then the other one was Gardner Minshew was named the starter over Nick Foles. I have to imagine, I don't know what the Jaguars are going to do with Nick Foles. Whatever they do is going to cost them probably a lot of money. So, other than that, you have anything else in regards to news this week?
I don't think so, man. I think we're ready to jump into these week 14 plays we have lined up.
Okay, so we're just going to kind of go ahead and talk about some of our top plays. Typically, we like to avoid getting into like the real, like the obvious of the obvious, but I wanted to kind of, with it being week 14 and kind of everything on the line, I kind of did want to highlight at least a couple of the upper echelon guys that, maybe, which we already kind of hit on. Patrick Mahomes, we don't have to talk about him. I actually have Pat Mahomes ranked as my number one quarterback this week, going against New England. And then, but I do want to talk about some of these guys. So let's just kind of start it off. For you have Carson Wentz going against the Jets or the Giants, this week, which is a rough, right? Because they just lost to the Dolphins. Really, and the Dolphins just, hit them with that fake, that fake with the with the punter to the kicker in the end zone, which was just disheartening. And then they started laughing at them, but they ended up losing that game 37-31 when. Really, the kind of narrative was early after the Cowboys lost that the Eagles might be coming back and taking this division, and of course they abruptly lose to one of the worst teams in the league. So now the Eagles have an amazing matchup again this week against the Giants, who are also a train wreck. However, this is a divisional game, so I don't know if you can even count that out. But what do you like about Carson Wentz this week?
Yeah, even though they lost last week, Carson Wentz was still QB8 on the week. He had over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. So biggest thing is just the matchup. The Giants have given up a QB 1 week every week this year except 2. Week 4, when it was like the Haskins and Keenum combination, and then Kyler in week 7. And like you were talking about with Mahomes and how important these next couple of games are. These next couple of games are super important for Philly as well. They're all in division, and they're 1 game behind Dallas for that divisional lead. So got to figure Wentz comes out. The run game hasn't been too strong, and we just saw Aaron Rodgers tear up this defense as well. So I like Carson Wentz as a solid QB1 play this week.
Yeah, I don't mind that. I think I'm at QB9. So I think he is at a pretty fantastic spot. I already hit on Ryan Tannehill. That was one I wanted to talk about. I do think he's a viable option this week. I believe I have him ranked at QB10 this week. I could probably have him a little bit higher if I wanted to. I could probably move him around, but it's been pretty amazing to see what Ryan Tannehill has done. And to be honest with you, like, it's not like they have a ton of weapons there. They have AJ Brown and Corey Davis, really no tight end. So as well as he's played, like, I think it's been encouraging. And I wonder, it's going to be interesting to see what they do with him over the offseason. If they extend him, if they give him another, I don't want to see him. I don't think it would be wise for them to go out and just drop like, give him a 4 or 5 year deal or something like that. But, even if they just franchise him for a year, just to kind of see if he can replicate this again next year, because I think this has been encouraging to watch him play this year. So, but this matchup against Oakland is one you want to see. For me, another strong play this week, I think, would be Baker Mayfield going against Cincinnati. The Bengals have been awful all year, even though they, on the defensive side of the football. So I do think Baker Mayfield makes a lot of sense this week, and I would be starting him with confidence. Another one that I was actually surprised that, like, a lot of people seem to be down this week. If you look at like Fantasy Pros as expert consensus rankings, they have Matt Ryan at 18, which I was surprised, because I'm like, I have him at QB 11. This is against Carolina. I'm not nervous about playing Carolina, especially their pass defense. I do think that Julio Jones will be back this week. They said he's trending up, which is, I think, encouraging for their entire offense. If they get Austin Hooper back, they're back to full strength with Julio, Austin Hooper, Calvin Ridley. So there's a lot to like here. And so I'm playing Matt Ryan with confidence. I think he's a solid QB1 as well. What are your thoughts on Matt Ryan this week?
Yeah, I like Matt Ryan a lot. Obviously, if Hooper comes back, if Julio is healthy, and even if not, Calvin Ridley has stepped up the past couple of weeks. Russell Gage can even be counted on as a deeper league kind of flex play. And the beginning of the year, Carolina just looked like a run funnel. I mean, they still kind of are that, but their secondary looked a lot stronger than it does now. So that is too low for me. I haven't gone through and done my rankings yet because you are a tryhard and you have already gone and done yours already. But he should be closer to that back end QB1 range, I would think. Like they have, I'm looking at the Fantasy Pros consensus rankings right now as well. And like Kyler Murray at 11 going up against the Steelers, like that one, like I could easily put Matt Ryan at that 11 spot right there instead of Kyler. But somebody that I like deeper down the ranks, the old Fitz Magic man, Ryan Fitzpatrick. Last 3 weeks he's been QB 23, 5, and 2. Even in that QB 23 week, he still had 323 passing yards, but his total fantasy points just didn't look that good because I don't think he had any touchdowns that week. He gets the Jets, and if you look at their numbers over the past couple of weeks, they do look a little bit better, but they've also played Washington, Oakland, and Cincy. And your boy Andy Dalton got the best of them. I don't think Washington or Oakland had over 200 passing yards against them, but I think Dalton had 233 or something last week. So even though their number, like if you're just looking at their numbers over the past couple of weeks, they're going to look better. But this is something where you can get caught up in that no matter what position or what weeks you're looking at. You always have to take a look and see who they played. And I think like the Jets waxed Oakland 2 weeks ago. So those are the kind of things you have to take into consideration anytime you look at those kind of numbers. But yeah, man, Ryan Fitzpatrick just throwing it up and gonna get Devontae Parker looked at further. I think they gave him a 2-year deal this offseason though. So if Parker can keep this up next year, maybe he'll get that big payday after that.
Yeah, it's been wild with Parker this year. Like, and he really hasn't been someone that, like, I mean, except for lately, I should say, like, hasn't been someone that's gotten a lot of like conversation about him, right? Like, and he's been most of the time like kind of a joke, where people just kind of like, oh, like the offseason, right? We were hearing like what we hear every offseason about positive camp news, positivity, like, oh, he looks great, he's doing amazing, and then the season comes and nothing really happens, or he's hurt, and now, like, I mean, he looked like just out there like an alpha, right? Like a number one true wide receiver one last week. I mean, out there just dominating. So I don't know. Maybe it took him a while to figure it out, but it's going to be interesting to see what happens to him because he's a free agent after this year. And so I don't know you wonder if the Dolphins bring him back. Does he want to come back? Does he go to sign somewhere else? Because I mean, he might be one of the top free agents on the open market this year.
Are you talking about Parker?
Yeah.
I think they gave him a 2-year deal, but it was like a club option after the first year. So I got to figure they're going to bring him back on that second year.
We'll see. We'll see what happens. It's going to be interesting to watch, but it's been fun to watch him because I mean he has quietly kind of just went about his business this year and has been pretty solid. So. So we'll see. I wouldn't be surprised if they bring old Fitzpatrick back for another year. I mean, they're likely going to be drafting quarterback early in this draft, and I don't think they want to just shove him into the starting lineup, whomever that is. So I could see them bringing back Fitzpatrick for one more year and to get their franchise quarterback ready.
What would you be doing this week with somebody like Dak going at Chicago?
I think that's a tough matchup. Like, it's obviously not ideal, but I do think that it's tough because it is a Thursday night game, right? And so
Yeah.
those kind of go. But the good news is it's not really for them because they played Thursday night. They both teams played last Thursday, so they're getting a full week in between. So it's not like your typical quick turnaround. I mean, we're not. This game isn't going to be like that at all because both teams played last Thursday. So, I think for me, like I think you're still fine. Like I have Dak at QB6. I think you're definitely still starting him. And I even kind of like Trubisky a little bit too. Like he's finally kind of starting to figure things out a little bit. Granted that was against the Lions last week, but the Cowboys defense isn't one that really strikes a lot of fear in me. So, we know he's going to be able to have Tom, and I think the secondary can be beat in Chicago, even though it is on the road. But I do think Dak is at least I think he's a solid play again this week. Some other ones that I do still like, Kirk Cousins, I think is in a fantastic spot against Detroit. They are at home. I think they are going to crush the Lions. And then for me, Sam Darnold, again, I think you can start him with confidence. I know it was not very good results last week against the Bengals, but this week playing the Dolphins and what could be, I think, or might be the worst matchup the entire week, I think. Actually, I think that it is. I mean, in terms of people actually wanting to watch. Now, fantasy goodness, I think there's a lot of fantasy goodness that comes from this game because both sides of the football, at least through the air, are going to be one that I think we want to target.
Yeah. Jared Goff, I mean, that offense kind of turned it around against the hapless Cardinals. They're home against Seattle, and their defense has been exposed this year. It's not the same defense that it was of yesteryear. I mean, but two guys that are in good spots that I don't feel great about. Jacoby Brissett at Tampa Bay. I mean, that's one we should typically be more excited about. And then on the other side of the Matt Ryan, we already touched on Kyle Allen at Atlanta.
Yeah, I think you can expect mixed results from Kyle Allen. He's had some weeks where he's looked good, and other weeks he just looks atrocious. So I don't know. I don't know if I would be able to trust that, especially on the road. But it should be a good matchup for them, for him. But you'd have to get pretty desperate to be playing him, and with this being the playoffs, like I just can't imagine that's who you're rolling with. But same with Brissett. Like, this Tampa Bay defense is kind of, we knew their run defense was really good, but even their pass defense the last couple of weeks has been better. So I don't know. We'll see with him, but like I would rather play Ryan Fitzpatrick. I would rather play, I would probably even rather play maybe possibly a, some other option, maybe a Jimmy Garoppolo, or even maybe Mitch Trubisky. I just don't love Kyle Allen, but Jacoby Brissett I think is in a better spot. I have him at 20. But like I said, Jared Goff is also going to be an interesting case because Seattle, their pass defense is something to be desired. And we did see them bounce back this week, which he was like the easiest call of the week in DFS last week. But and then this game does open up as a pretty decent high total on this for this slate. It is 46, and we're seeing positive line movement already through Vegas where. Seattle opened up as a 3-point favorite. They've already been bet down to -1 favorite, and the total went from 46 to open up all the way up to now it's up to 48 and a half in some places. So people are really hammering the over in this game. So this looks like a game that's going to have a lot of fantasy goodness to be had here. And it's an overrated factor that I don't think a lot of, especially in especially in redraft, where people don't go look at these types of things. If you're making a decision, if you're wanting to stream a quarterback, or you have a decision to make, like these are some things that I would want to be looking at. Is it a home favorite, for a running back or something like that? Because if that's the things you're kind of looking for. Now in redraft it's tough because you're kind of limited to who you have. So it's not like you can just go out and start anybody you want. But if there's a decision to be made, if you have two quarterbacks or you're having to stream a quarterback, like these are the things that I'd be trying to look at.
Where you can get those kind of things, Kev? You can get those in my weekly start sit article where I do have the lines and the spreads. So shameless little plug there.
Yeah, they should be because those are things that really do matter. Like I get it that we're consolidated to that lineup, but if you're making a start sit decision, these are things that I'd be looking at. It's not the only decision I'd be looking at, but it certainly plays a factor because I would much rather play a guy who's in a high scoring game versus, get a guy that's projected to play in a game that's 38.
Yeah, absolutely. And then also helping if you're like a late week kind of scratch or an injury situation pops up, if you're if you're looking at a kind of a desperate heave to the waiver wire, that's something you can take into consideration there as well.
Yeah. Some other ones I think for me that would be like a sit situation. I would be really hard pressed to play Kyler Murray. I know they're at home, but Pittsburgh's defense has been elite. So I really wouldn't want to go there. A Josh Allen, I think you could have some consideration for going against Baltimore, but I don't know. With his rushing ability, it's hard to really think about sitting him. It would just really depend on what other options there are. So it'd be hard. I'd be hard pressed to sit him. But actually, I guess it's a good question. So would you sit like a Josh Allen get against Baltimore for like a Ryan Fitzpatrick type, where we know Ryan Fitzpatrick, solid matchup against the Jets. Ryan Fitzpatrick, has quietly, been pretty damn good as of recently.
Yeah, I feel like I am the resident Josh Allen hater. So, like, I just don't see him having with Fitzpatrick, you might get the complete dud. There might not be a floor there at all, but I feel like his ceiling is easily higher than somebody like Josh Allen. So, that's one of those situations where maybe you are the last seed in your playoffs and kind of have a little bit of a weaker team and you need someone that might be able to put up 320 yards and 3 touchdowns. Like if I saw that line and I saw Josh Allen or Fitzpatrick, like I'm going to be like, oh, okay, that was probably Fitzpatrick's line over Josh Allen. So Fitz definitely has the matchup like we talked about. So yeah, I would have no trouble sitting somebody like Josh Allen in this kind of situation. What about somebody like Drew Brees, who you might be carrying two quarterbacks just because with the time he spent injured? Drew Brees at home, but going up against San Fran. Is he somebody you would think about sitting? Like if you had a better option, like maybe if you had like you touched on a Baker Mayfield, Matt Ryan, is that somebody or either of those two quarterbacks somebody you might think about playing over Brees, or are you just going to play Brees in that situation?
I think you could easily sit Drew Brees this week. It's not ideal, but the San Francisco the San Francisco defense is legit. And this is, even though it is at home for San Francisco for New Orleans, I just don't think I'd want to mess around with it. Sure, it could burn you. But I would probably bet against it more often than not. That it's not going to, and I would probably rather play, some of those other options. Should mention too with Ryan Fitzpatrick, they did play earlier in the year, and he threw for 290 and 3 touchdowns against the Jets. So
let's go.
We do have some recent history here. So I actually have Drew Brees ranked at 18th this week. So I do not love him. So, anyways, I think that's it. Let's go ahead and move on over to the running back position, and we can jump into that. Who are some of your top running back plays this week that you want to get into your lines?
So somebody just in one of those, in the RB1 vein, definitely Nick Chubb. Even though he's been losing touches and especially the passing game involvement to Kareem Hunt since he's come back. What was that, week 10 or 11? They do have the matchup against Cincy. Cincy's allowing the 5th most rushing yards per game. And as bad as they are on the ground, they are allowing the 10th fewest receptions. So obviously that would go toward Kareem Hunt. I don't think Cincy's in any sort of position to shut out somebody like Kareem Hunt, who's looked pretty good since he's come back. And you were touching on it whenever we were just talking about quarterbacks, but the Browns are 8.5 point home favorites. So that goes in that game script. You got to figure that they're going to be leading, which and even though that Hunt has been more involved in taking away a lot of that passing game work, I mean Chubb has still been getting 20 carries per week basically, except last week where Freddie Kitchens thought it would be a good idea to only give Chubb and Hunt a combined I think 6 rush attempts in the second half. So I don't think we necessarily have to worry about that. And this is one of those situations where even if Chubb only gets 15 or 16 carries instead of 22, 23, that could easily be a 120 and 2 kind of line. So as far as like a running back 1 conversation, Nick Chubb is definitely someone. I mean, you weren't thinking about sitting him to begin with, but it wouldn't surprise me if he finished this week as like the overall RB2 or 3, something like that. Another guy I love this week, Melvin Gordon at Jacksonville. Jacksonville just been shredded on the ground over the past several weeks. So somebody who you might have been a little hesitant to plug in your lineup just because of with Austin Eckler and the slow start he got off to whenever he did come back. But I think Melvin Gordon can be plugged into your lineup with confidence as your RB1 if that's the kind of situation you're looking at with your lineups. Who do you like at the top of the list there, Kev?
Well, one is Derrick Henry, right? Derrick Henry has been a monster, and I'm not breaking any news by saying I love Derrick Henry this week. I mean, he's had, let's see, over the last 3 weeks, he has 191, 191 total yards, 175 total yards, 166 total yards. So, going against this Oakland defense who is not great against the run. They're not terrible, but I think some of it is also the product of, their passing game as well. They have allowed 19.8 fantasy points per game to the running back position. And so, this is the time to shine for Derrick Henry, this late season run where he just grinds you down and it just steps on your throat. We kind of see it every year. This year, he just happened to start a little bit sooner. And so, yeah, I love Derrick Henry this week. But, like I said, I'm not really breaking any news by saying that. But some of the other guys I really like, I think Miles Sanders is at least he had a big, one of his bigger games of the year last week against the Dolphins, as we mentioned, going against the Giants this week. His ability to, be utilized as a pass catcher as well. And I think that the Giants are a team that can keep it close with the Eagles. And if they do, I think that spells good things for Miles Sanders is be utilized more as a pass catcher as well. We'll have to wait and see what happens with Jordan Howard this week. Jay Ajayi looks like Jay Ajayi, and he is just a guy. And likely may not be back in the NFL after this year. But I just don't think he really showed anything. So Miles Sanders is somebody, barring Jordan Howard being back, I think Miles Sanders is a fantastic spot this week. I think he's a solid flex RB2 type play. And then Devonta Freeman, this is more just about matchup. Carolina's run defense has been really bad. We saw it last week against Washington where the Redskins just destroyed them. They have allowed the most rushing touchdowns on the year, and it's not even close. The next closest is Green Bay. Carolina has allowed 19 rushing touchdowns this year. The next closest, like I said, is Green Bay with 13 rushing touchdowns. It's pretty bad. So Devonta Freeman, who hasn't been good by any stretch of the imagination this year, but I think that he could easily find the end zone in this game, maybe get you 70, 80 yards. So for people that probably don't have a lot of confidence in Devonta Freeman because he just really hasn't been that good. I mean, he's been okay. He's had a couple okay weeks. Week 4, he had 18. He had 18 against Houston, and he had the big 26.8. But he's Devonta Freeman. But, last week he played 77% of the snaps. So there's no issue here with worrying about injury. He saw 5 targets against the Saints. So 1 red zone opportunity as well. So I do like Devonta Freeman, where I don't think a lot of people probably have much confidence in him, but I think that he should at least be viewed as a solid, RB2 flex type play.
Yeah, he should definitely be in that flex consideration just based solely off the matchup. somebody I like a little further down the line like that, Jamal Williams. You're just talking about Green Bay. Williams hasn't been he hasn't been an all-star by any means, but he's definitely been efficient with the touches he's been given, especially playing with somebody like Aaron Jones. If you're looking for somebody like kind of like in that flex RB3 kind of range, you're basically looking at like 8 to 10 points. He's failed to reach 10 points in only 4 games, and he has failed to reach 8 points in just one. So he definitely falls within that range. And the matchup is good there going with Washington. And on the other side of that, I think Darius Geis is definitely in play. I mean, we saw last week why we've been so excited about him the past 2 years, and even though he's been dealing with the injuries, you already mentioned Green Bay giving up the second most rushing touchdowns of 13. They're allowing the 4th most half PPR points per game. And even though he's splitting time with AP, I think he can still get it done for you and end up in that RB2 range for week 14.
No, yeah, I really like Darius Geis. Actually, I played him a lot in DFS last week, and that worked out pretty well. So I really enjoyed that. So other than that, just kind of looking at some of the other running back options, like if you actually had to. What is your thoughts on, if you're on Twitter, this guy was kind of a back and forth where a lot of people just kind of laughed it off a couple weeks ago. But Patrick Laird with Miami, like he looks to be the starting running back now with this team. Now that Kalen Ballage got put on IR today, what is your thoughts on him?
My thought is I can't do it. Like if you're reaching that far down at this point, like, oh man, like it's not like outside of the touchdown, like I don't even think he was really that good last week.
I think he finished with 18 fantasy points. Yeah, because he had 5. Yeah, he had 4 receptions, 43 yards, and he found had a touchdown. But he did rush 10 times for 5 yards. So maybe it's not Kalen Ballage's fault. Maybe it's just their fucking offensive line who can't create any holes.
Yeah, I mean, if you're reaching that low, I mean, he's obviously not going to be as widely available as Patrick Laird. But I mean, honestly, man, I like Myles Gaskin better, and maybe we see more of him this week. I know he had a handful of touches last week, but somebody like if you're digging that deep, like a Benny Snell, I'd much rather play him at Arizona. Like, obviously, depending on if Connor comes back. Trying to think, like, what are you doing with the Peyton Barber, Ronald Jones situation? Obviously, this week with Indy isn't a great matchup anyway. Do you have a read on that one way or another? Or are you just completely staying away from it? How are you handling that? Like even somebody else, like an Alexander Madison, like I know he's available in 25% of leagues. Like even if Dalvin Cook plays this week, I would rather play Alexander Madison on like maybe the 8 to 9 touches that he would get if Cook ends up being active.
It kind of goes back to the same thing I was talking about. Like, if this was week 6 or something, or week 10, it's one thing, but like we're in the playoffs now, right? And I can't imagine a team is that desperate. Now, then again, like we talked about, there's a lot of teams that get into the playoffs that maybe have no business being in the playoffs, but got a little lucky and had some things go their way, and now they're in the playoffs, right? Like it happens. And so, like, if you're here contemplating this decision, like, I don't know if I could play Alexander Madison. I love the dude. I think that he has a chance to be a stud if anything were to ever happen to Dalvin Cook. I think he's someone that people should have been stashing all year. But you're right. I mean, does he have a higher upside than probably what like a Patrick Laird does? Yeah, sure. Am I going to want to run out and pick up Patrick Laird? Probably not. This isn't a great matchup. We talked about the Jets. Their run defense has been surprisingly one of the best in the league. They are definitely
I think they're what, second in DVOA right now.
Yeah,
At least they were last week.
Yeah, they were last week. I'm not sure where they're sitting now. I haven't looked for this week, but I know they were. I think they were number 2 in pass DVOA, or excuse me, run DVO. Actually, I have it pulled up already, so I can just tell you right now. They fell to. Well, that's pass. Where's run? Nope, they're still number 2 in run DVOA. Yeah, through week 12. Or no, we were in week 13. I should update this.
I mean, the Jets are giving up the 10th fewest half PPR fantasy points per game. I mean, behind defenses that are really solid, obviously, Pats, Bucks, Niners, Saints, Colts, Steelers, Ravens, Eagles, and the Vikings. Those are the only teams that are giving up fewer half PPR fantasy points per game to running backs.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, and I guess another good question this week, because I know a lot of people probably this probably be another hot button guy this week that would be a Sony Michel. We know the Chiefs have really struggled to stop the run. The Raiders, I mean, Josh Jacobs last week got 100 yards against the Chiefs. I feel like that, you know, this is kind of the Patriots blueprint against the Chiefs, especially in the playoffs last year, and kind of what a lot of teams that have beat the Chiefs this year, their blueprint this year was to run the ball and keep Mahomes off the field. Where I don't think a lot of people probably even want to play Sony Michel this year just because he's been kind of so bad this year. I mean, has 645 rushing yards on the year. I mean, that is not good. He does have 6 rushing touchdowns, so that's a little bit encouraging. But, I mean, through 12 games, I mean, it's just not been good for him. And so, I mean, he's kind of – what are you doing with him, though, this week?
I'd be fine starting him as, you know, kind of like as an RB2, and you're just kind of like the how we talk about tight ends. You're just crossing your fingers and hoping that he scores a touchdown. I mean, last week against Houston, he did average over 4 yards per carry. He had 10 for 45. Week before that at Dallas, he had 20 for 85. So he's not going to give you anything in the passing game. He's had 4 targets just once this year. A bunch of zeros, a couple of 2s, a couple of 3s. So he's not going to give you much in the ways of the passing game. But he has taken advantage of some solid matchups. Washington, he went 16 for 91 with a touchdown. The Jets, I mean, he only had 42 yards, but he ended up with 22 fantasy points that game on the back of some touchdowns as well. So, like you said, the kind of the blueprint with Kansas City is out, and you would think that they want to keep that offense on the sideline as much as they can. So, and like you said, we saw this happen last year with the Patriots on their playoff run, and that's a reason why people were so excited about Sony Michel this year, just going based off of what we saw him do in the playoffs. So, if there's going to be a time to plug him in as an RB2, I mean, you have this week at Kansas City. Next week, they're at Cincinnati, so that's going to be a nice matchup as well if you make it to week 15. But, yeah, I mean, I would have no trouble throwing him in as an RB2. I mean, unless you somehow have 2 options that are better than that, then I would still start him in, kind of like a flex position. But the matchup is good enough there that I wouldn't have any trouble starting him this week.
I mean, efficiency-wise, he's been awful. I mean, and he's really been awful for fantasy purposes either, too. I mean, his 9.6 fantasy points per game is 41st in the league, 41st among running backs. That is not what you want to see. He's 44th in juke rate, 26th in evaded tackles, 36th in breakaway runs. I mean, he has just not 54th in yards per touch. The only thing he's really been good at, or only thing that he is 9th in red zone touches, which is why you see it with the 6 total touchdowns is 15th in the league. That's the only thing that he's done well this year. So, and the fact that he doesn't carry the ball or get opportunities out of the back or as a pass catcher, like we even saw last week where the Patriots started getting James White opportunities to run the football too. Usually James White's more of just the pass catching back, but I mean, he was getting, carries last week as well. So, I don't mind Sony Michel, but if you had a better option, I would consider sitting him. I get the allure with wanting to play this, but I mean, if you look at this game, this has the highest total on the slate. It's the only game that is above 50 right now, and the line opened at New England negative or -4. It has dropped to New England -2.5. So money is coming in on Kansas City, and so that does not spell well for following those little types of things. Does not spell well for a Patriots running back. Again, it really would depend on what your options were to be able to sit him. Like I said, I think he is more of just like an RB3 for me. So.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, he's going to be touchdown dependent, but just based on matchup, I would put him in that RB2 kind of range. I mean, would you start Sony? Would you start like somebody like a Jamal Williams over Sony? Rashad Penny?
I would start Rashad Penny over him, yeah.
Just trying to look at some of these guys who are like Kareem Hunt.
That one's tough. Yeah, I think you can. I mean, they have they put Kareem Hunt out there. I mean, it's been frustrating, right? Like it actually kind of happened, right? Like we kind of talked about it, in the preseason. Oh, what's going to happen when Kareem Hunt comes back? Not that they've stopped using Nick Chubb, because Nick Chubb is still far and away leading his backfield and rushes on most of the weeks since he's been back. But the problem is they just haven't really utilized him as a pass catcher anymore. That's been, and he got sniped out of the touchdown because of the passing touchdown to Kareem Hunt last week. Like, I do not think that Kareem Hunt is back next year with this team. Like, I would be shocked. He will be a free agent after this year. He signed the 1-year deal with Cleveland. So once he's gone, and as long as Cleveland doesn't do anything stupid, like Nick Chubb, I think should be somebody that people should look as a locked-in top 5 running back next year. But he's killed people this year in the playoffs because of it. But Kareem Hunt right now, I think, is a viable, very viable flex option, and probably should be starting every week, especially in a matchup against Cincinnati.
Yeah, that makes sense. Are you feeling more confident with Todd Gurley, considering his recent usage?
Yeah. I mean, I think in a matchup against Seattle, I think he's fine. Where do I have him at? I have him at RB13. The real question is, though, like, I know you can't sit him, but you cannot feel confident if you're a Saquon Barkley owner. I would be really curious to know the number of people that made the playoffs with Saquon Barkley this year. I have to imagine it's much lower than what you'd expect.
Yeah, you got to figure that's top 2, top 3 pick, depending on if people went McCaffrey or Zeke ahead of him, and that's not a great matchup this week either at Philly. So, dude, his passing usage hasn't been there. He hasn't been getting near the involvement in the passing game. And the other thing that's been killing him too is those big chunk explosive plays just haven't been there either. And that's been, it's kind of what I think, kind of masked this last year was, he would have a lot of these 2, 3, 1, 3, 2 kind of carries, but then snap off a 29-yard touchdown, and then he would be more involved in the passing game, and a lot of that stuff covered up for, kind of like with how he's been looking this year. That line wasn't great last year. It looked better to start off the year this year, but the offensive line has kind of regressed as well. So I'd be curious to see how many of those targets have gone away from Daniel Jones kind of just pulling it down and running, where Eli was just dumping it off to him. But like you said, you can't sit him, but you also can't plug him in and feel confident that you're going to get, even like a top 14 kind of week. Given his how he's looked in recent weeks, and then the matchup with Philly. So that's one that, man, if like you said, if you made it into the playoffs with Barkley, you're thanking your lucky stars and then just hoping you're able to ride out that that lucky streak that you have going.
Yeah, I mean, you have to go all the way back to week 8, the last time he scored over 20. This actually was the last time since week 9 this week, because he was okay this past week. He had 115 total yards. He has not found the end zone since week 8, which has been a big issue for them, or for him. He is getting some red zone carries. He's just not getting as many as he hasn't that you would usually expect. But he had 1 red zone carry this last week against Green Bay. He did see 7 targets, which was a little encouraging. That's the most he's seen since week 9 against Dallas. So I think that is a little encouraging. So hopefully that can continue. He is still being elusive. I mean, he had 12 evaded tackles this past week. So I don't know. Hopefully maybe this is a sign of things to come. I do know that they had talked about it, that he was highly motivated this last week, blah, 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 blah. But it was a more encouraging game, at least at the very least, against Green Bay. Or this past week. So anyways, I think let's go ahead and jump over to the wide receiver position. I think this one is a pretty interesting decision. Some interesting decisions here on this one. For you, who are some of your guys you're looking at playing this week?
I mean, like you said, we try to steer away from the obvious ones, but somebody that I love this week kind of to rebound, especially after last week, Chris Godwin. You're starting him regardless, no matter how kind of a letdown week he had last week. But they have Indy this week. They play predominantly a zone defense, and I think that should benefit Godwin. So he should be in a prime kind of bounce back spot there. And like that whole offense, like as much as like as high as that score was, as much as they were beating him by like. OJ Howard, I think, had more yards than Godwin and Evans. So it was just a weird week altogether. Here's a question for you. What are you doing with Odell Beckham? The matchup is there, but dude, he has what, less than 30 yards for the third time this season, I think. What are you doing if you have Odell?
I think you play him. I mean, this is a great matchup against the Bengals. I think Jarvis Landry right now looks like the better option, but I have Odell as at 19 this week. I have Jarvis Landry at 17. I think they're pretty close. Another factor to probably consider would be the fact that David Njoku could also be back this week. Which would take a little bit of some targets away from them. But I do think this is a great spot for them. And so I think this is a good bounce back spot for Odell. And so, yeah, I think you're starting him. If you have him, I can't imagine ever thinking about sitting him.
Right.
Especially in this matchup.
Yeah, I wanted to throw him out. Like I said, I was a little surprised when I pulled up Fantasy Pros and saw that he was sitting at 11. Like, I get the matchup and everything, but that offense has just kind of looked off in general. Another guy, we kind of touched on that already, Devontae Parker gets the Jets. I think this could also be, kind of like the talk about Godwin in a bounce back spot. Tyler Lockett at the LA Rams. I would assume that it's going to be somebody on the outside regardless. So whether it's Metcalf or Josh Gordon, they're going to be getting the Ramsey treatment. I think Lockett only has 1 catch over the past 2 weeks, so I think this could be a nice bounce back spot for him. We touched on this game a bunch already, but Calvin Ridley, I like this week, kind of like as your wide receiver 2 kind of play. Tyler Boyd, definitely back in the good graces with the Red Rocket there, back at the helm. Who else do I have here? And then Robbie Anderson, kind of too little, too late, almost for for where you drafted him. He was definitely a disappointment up until this spot, but 2 weeks ago, I think 4 for 85 and a touchdown. Last week he had 7 for 101. Again, the matchup with Miami, they're giving up the 6th most fantasy points per game to wide receivers. And they've also given up the most touchdowns across the NFL. So those are some of the plays I like this week. What about you, Kev? Where are you looking? Who are some of your top guys for week 14?
In terms of the guys that people are going to have to make decisions on, and probably like who you'd be potentially wanting to start. I think for me, I actually have Devontae Parker as a wide receiver 1 this week. I'm him at 12 in PPR formats. I think this is a great matchup for them, and it's hard to ignore him. He is like I said, the alpha in the offense, and this is a great matchup in a pass funnel. Against a pass funnel. The great thing is that the Dolphins have generally been trailing all year, so. I think Devontae Parker. I mean, it's crazy. This is where we're at, week 14 of 2019, and we are talking about Devontae Parker as a wide receiver 1.
Yeah, love it, man. You have to love it.
Yeah. So past that, like I said, I already talked about Jarvis Landry. I think that he's in a great spot. But then some of the other guys that I do like this week are Anthony Miller is definitely one. We're gonna have to monitor to see kind of what happens with Taylor Gabriel, because I think that factors in a little bit. But overall, I mean, everything's kind of been flowing to him. Really, the last 3 weeks, he's at 11, 9, and 13 targets each of the last 3 weeks. Excuse me. He played 86% of the snaps last week. He had a monster week with 9 for a 140. Was wide receiver 7 overall last week. Or on Thanksgiving, and this matchup against Dallas is certainly not anything that really scares me. Dallas is 23rd in pass DVOA. So, I mean, they're not really a defense that I'm overly concerned about. Obviously, there is some concern and risk with playing anybody that's tethered to Mitchell Trubisky, but I do like Anthony Miller, and I think that he should be viewed as a wide receiver 3 flex type play, wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4. And it took a while. Like, he was the guy I think a lot of people liked as a preseason breakout candidate, and just never really got many opportunities until later in the year. And now he is starting to kind of put things together. Another one for me would be Sterling Shepard. Last week in that game that was, the snow game, if you will, but he did see 7 targets last week, 3 receptions for 40 yards and a touchdown. This week, again, I think it's a pretty decent matchup, and he seems to be one of Daniel Jones' kind of favorite targets. Prior to his, really on the year, he's seeing heavy loads of targets. I mean, week 1, he got 7, 9, 9, 10, 9, and then 7 last week. So even coming back from the concussion, like, he continually is running a lot of routes. He's getting a lot of targets. So they are banged up at the wide receiver position. We'll have to see what happens to Golden Tate. If he comes off the concussion protocol, if Evan Ingram returns. But even still, I think this is a game where they're going to be trailing and they're going to need to throw the ball a ton. So I like Sterling Shepard as well as one of those, kind of flex options. And then Curtis Samuel's the last one going against Atlanta. Great matchup, kind of their deep threat. But I think this is a game that they're going to have to throw the ball a ton and kind of a high-scoring affair. So Curtis Samuel's another guy I really like this week.
Yeah, as far as your Anthony Miller call, Taylor Gabriel, as of yesterday, was still in the concussion protocol, so that does bode well for Anthony Miller at this point. Somebody else I think is worth mentioning is Courtland Sutton. He's just been putting up numbers and producing no matter who they have back there at quarterback. Drew Lock came in last week in his first start, and Sutton had 2 touchdowns last week, didn't he? I believe he had 2. Kenny Golladay, we already saw what he can do on limited targets. I mean, he does get Minnesota again, not the Minnesota of yesteryear, kind of like we were talking about with Seattle. That's not the same defense. Deebo Samuel seems to be somebody that San Francisco is getting more involved, even with Emmanuel Sanders being there. If he's playing on the inside, I think he's been playing like 28% of his snaps, I think, are coming from the slot. So he'll obviously avoid Lattimore there. If he is on the outside, I'm not sure if they would just glue Lattimore to Sanders, but we need either way. They move Deebo inside enough that he'll be able to get away from Lattimore. Is there anybody you like further on. I see somebody like further on down the list. You wanna talk about your boy Darius or
Darius Slayton?
Your boy.
Is that what we're talking about? Darius Slayton?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's going to depend on what happens with all these other players. If Golden Tate's out or if Evan Ingram's out. Like if all those guys are out and it's him and Darius Slayton would definitely be in play. This is a Monday night game and in Philly, so I don't know. We'll see what happens, but it's a tough one because that's a long. You'll have to wait and see what happens. You're gonna have to make a decision before then. I don't know if we'll fully know. As for you mentioned Taylor Gabriel still in concussion protocol. With them playing Thursday, I think that's good news because you can make that decision early. And if he's still in concussion protocol on Tuesday, I find it really, really, really hard to believe that he's going to clear concussion protocol in time to be able to play Thursday. So I do think that kind of boosts Anthony Miller up, in my opinion. So what do you think about a guy like Terry McLaurin this week going against Green Bay, who have really struggled to stop the pass? And now it is, Dwayne Haskins. I don't know if you ever know what to expect from him, but they were able to, beat the Panthers this past week, and Green Bay's pass defense has been really suspect. So,
yeah, I was just expecting so much more, especially given the Ohio State connection, and apparently Haskins said that that was kind of his request that they draft McLaurin so that he had him there in Washington. Green Bay has been up and down with their secondary. They kind of seem to be another team that was in the same vein as Carolina, where the beginning of the year they looked really solid on the outside and they were a run funnel, but we've seen them give up some bigger games. He's someone who you probably picked up off of waivers, so I would assume that you have better options to play. Like I'd rather play Michael Gallup, even at Chicago, like we were talking about already. I'd rather play him. Robert Woods. I'd rather play. Like you should have better options than Terry McLaurin. If you have to play him, I guess it wouldn't be the worst. It wouldn't be the worst thing. But like I said, you probably picked him off of waivers. If not, he was your round 16, 17 pick. So you should have better options ahead of him, unless you just completely struck out all over the place. Taking like a Juju and a Corey Davis or something like that. But there are just other plays I'd rather go with, like Robbie Anderson. We already talked about. I'd rather play him as well. So I can't trust Haskins at this point.
Yeah, it's tough with Mahomes. I definitely think the talent's there. Like he's been open, he's had opportunities. It's just poor quarterback play. So, I think if you absolutely had to play him, and if you had to play him in the flex, like he'd be a decent option. But somebody that I wouldn't count on to give you a ton of upside. We just haven't seen it since Case Keenum played. So, I guess as far as wide receiver goes, I think we kind of hit on everybody. I guess the only one I would talk about is I think Adam Thielen probably returns this week. He was pretty close last week, and then he ended up sitting this past week. But I do think that this is a game that you can see him return. Maybe they don't because I feel like they can beat Detroit without Adam Thielen and give him another week. But it sounds like he's pretty close. If he plays, I think you automatically just insert him back in your lineup because they've said that he's not returning till he's 100%. So there's not much. There's always obvious chance of re-injury, but I think I'd feel pretty confident with sticking him back in my lineup, especially against Detroit. Another underrated one would be Marvin Jones. Marvin Jones has kind of historically crushed the Vikings. Just dominated them. And he actually had his monster game this year against Minnesota. So, if you own Marvin Jones, like he's in a pretty solid spot this week, and I think he's somebody that you could have some interest in playing, and I would probably be hard pressed to sit him. Some other guys like possibly like a Randall Cobb, I think, are in play. McCall Hardman, like I mentioned, I think sees more opportunities this week. Sammy Watkins apparently is just dead. Really has been washed.
Pour one out.
Yeah, like we talked about, like Cole Beasley's always in play just because he's that kind of underneath safety blanket for Josh Allen, Auden Tate. So there's some guys out there. But before we move on to tight end, let's answer a couple of these questions that we got here in the chat. Kyler Murray or Sam Darnold? Who are you going with? For me, it's let me put it this way. For me, it's Sam Darnold.
I'll go Darnold too.
I know it's tough, but this is just a really bad matchup against Pittsburgh. I mean, Pittsburgh's defense has been the reason that they have as many wins as they have. It's the only reason that they have what are they 7 or 8 wins? 7 wins? 7-5? Is that what they are?
Steelers?
Yeah.
Yeah, 7-5.
Yeah. So I mean, there's no other reason other than that they have that many wins is because of that defense they have, and I think they're going to be able to contain Kyler Murray and his running ability. I mean, which he was not running that much last week, and I know he's coming off that hamstring injury, so I don't know if that had anything to do with it. And if he can't throw, it's night. Like it's just. Or if he can't run, excuse me. So that would definitely be a consideration for me. So I would probably rather play Sam Darnold, who I think has a higher upside and a much better matchup.
Yeah, it's Darnold. Like somehow the Bengals turned back the hands of time and actually had a pass rush last week, which is kind of what got Darnold and threw everything off. But the Miami Dolphins do not have a pass rush, so Darnold should have time, and this should be a bounce back spot for him. So let's go Darnold.
I know I mean, it's always risky, but I just think that if Kyler Murray's not going to throw the ball, terrible matchup, I would probably just rather play Sam Darnold, and especially on a crucial game, for all the marbles to be able to move on to next week, I'd probably rather just play the matchup and play Darnold.
Yeah, the Steelers secondary has been solid, especially with the addition of Minka, obviously, and then as athletic as Murray is, there are some pretty athletic guys on the Steelers side as well, which has been something that I have not been happy about with their drafting. Seems like Tomlin has always just gone for the high upside, highly athletic guys, but this is a place where that could pay off. So,
right. No, yeah. So, okay. So let's, I think we agree with Derek. Question you have: Melvin Gordon, Saquon, Chris Carson, Kareem Hunt. Which 3 would you play this week?
The first 3. I think I would sit Hunt.
So for me, I think I would probably go Melvin Gordon, Barkley, and Hunt.
That Carson
about Carson, and with the emergence of Rashad Penny. I don't know how that, I know this one game, that's what they wanted to do, but I don't know. I don't know about you, but I thought Rashad Penny looked much better than Chris Carson last week. I mean, he was explosive. Now, of course, he doesn't have the wear and tear on him that this year that Chris Carson does in week 14 or week 13 of the season. But I don't know. Like, I think that's a real concern. I think that you're not going to expect Chris Carson to go out there and give you the 70-80% of the touches like it was before. I think now it could be more of a 40-50% split. And if that's the case, now the concerning part for me only for Kareem Hunt would be the fact of the matchup, right? Now, if they're able to kind of roll in this game, you can see where Kareem Hunt doesn't get as many opportunities because he's basically kind of been more of the pass catching back. But I think in terms of his upside, I probably would go Gordon, Barkley, and Kareem Hunt.
That would be the one move that I would consider making there as well, would be putting in Hunt for Carson. So that's one of those situations where if you need more of a ceiling play, roll Hunt. But if you just need because even with Penny looking like the better, more explosive back, I mean, Carson still had 23, 24 touches in that game. We know that's what they want to do, is they want to run the ball. So, like you said, maybe it won't be that 70% level, but just based on volume, you got to figure that Carson's going to get more touches than Hunt will. But Hunt does have the matchup in his favor. So, like I said, that's something where if I need the floor play, I'm going to roll Carson in that scenario. If you're looking for more of a ceiling, Hunt is obviously I think would be the way to go, because I do think that Gordon is in a really good spot this week, and hopefully we see Barkley get more involved in the passing game as well, especially against Philly and their front seven.
Yeah, it should be mentioned too. The Rams are number 3 in run DVOA as well. So it's a tough matchup for them all together, on the ground. So not that will stop the Seahawks from trying to run the ball as much as they can, but
exactly.
If they fall behind early and the Seattle or the Rams offense is able to get things going in this game, which, let's be honest, the Seattle secondary has not been very good this year. Most teams have been able to throw on them without much issue. So I would expect them to try to go out and utilize that. So this is a tough matchup. I think that's the way I would probably lean in this one. So again, Gordon, Barkley, and Kareem Hunt for me. So. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump on over to tight ends, because I think we've kind of hit on everybody in the wide receiver position. So this week, what we're looking at right now, so some of the, we saw Jack Doyle last week go out and have a pretty solid game. Tyler Higbee went out and won people their weeks with his 23 fantasy points that he dropped on the Cardinals. And, the flow chart all year has been to just play tight ends against the Cardinals. Like, it just really hasn't stopped. It's been that way all year. This is another tough one. Vance McDonald hasn't been great this year, but again, we play tight ends who are playing against the Cardinals, and Vance McDonald is probably a tight end who is pretty widely available. And if you're needing a tight end, and say you have like an Austin Hooper, and Austin Hooper does not play this week because that is still well within the range of possibility, you just pick up Vance McDonald and insert him into your lineup.
Yeah, so McDonald is 50% owned in Yahoo League, so he's someone that should be available. We already touched on Jack Doyle, especially with Ebron hitting IR. With the other injuries that they have in Indy. It seems like T.Y. Hilton is. I think he's already basically out for this week, especially considering they came out and said that they're hopeful that he returns. By the end of the year. That doesn't sound great for his prospects for playing this year. For playing this week, rather. Somebody else, we've already touched on this matchup a bunch, so I won't dive into it too much here, but Mike Gesicki, again, another team with a bunch of injuries where they're not going to have a lot of options to spread it out. Gesicki has at least 6 targets in 5 straight games, and you mentioned them putting up, what would you say, 293, I think, just a couple weeks ago against the Jets. Gesicki had 6 for 95 in that one. So, I definitely think that's, again, someone who's going to be widely available that you can look to. Have you seen anything on Gerald Everett and whether or not he was looking to be back this week? Because they said he was day to day, I think, last week, but obviously he was ultimately ruled out.
No, not yet. It's something we're going to have to monitor until Tuesday. Both teams haven't really went back to practice yet. Most teams don't really get back to practicing until Wednesday. So maybe that's one of those situations that you probably just need to monitor this week. Because right now we haven't really heard anything. I haven't seen anything. Though I don't think that Higbee's. This is definitely a much different spot and not one that I would, unless there's just nobody else available. It's tough because I think there's actually in terms of just tight ends, I think there's some ones that are in some pretty good spots this week. Especially if we get Hooper back and Evan Ingram back, that changes a lot. But obviously you have the top guys with Kelsey and Ertz. And then, if Hooper's back, I think that puts him, especially against Carolina, I think that makes him a top 5 option because they don't have to do a ton to be able to be that. And so Austin Hooper inserts himself into that. Then you have George Kittle and Hunter Henry and Evan Ingram, Mark Ingram, and so then from there, Darren Waller, Jack Doyle now, I think the rest of the season is a tight end 1, lock him in, no questions asked. Ryan Griffin is in a great spot against Miami. You already mentioned Mike Gesicki, Dallas Goedert, who has continually gotten many opportunities because they just don't have that many pass catchers, so they're running a ton of 12 personnel. They're in Philly, a great matchup against the Giants. So I think both Ertz and Goedert are both, Goddard are both in great spots. And, Dallas Goedert really has been – he's been pretty solid. I mean, most teams, have 2 tight ends. You just don't really see that often. And hell, most teams don't even have 1 tight end, well, 2. But could you see yourself playing somebody, especially if like a Kyle Rudolph, depending on what happens with Adam Thielen? I think if Adam Thielen's back, I wouldn't want any part of Kyle Rudolph. But I think guys like Kyle Rudolph, Noah Fant, I guess maybe Jared Cook going against San Francisco, Jacob Hollister. I think there's a lot more. I think it's much more narrow this week at tight end than what we usually see on most weeks.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those situations we talk about it every week whenever we're looking at waiver options. But tight end is a position where you're just crossing your fingers and hoping for a touchdown. And as far as Rudolph goes, he has a touchdown in 5 of his last 6 games. Something like that. With he obviously put up 2 touchdowns against Dallas, and he just keeps having those back of the end zone one-handed grabs. So I mean, you could definitely do worse if you're looking for a tight end dependent kind of boom or bust play there. I was surprised Noah Fant wasn't more involved, especially with the rookie quarterback targeting his tight end narrative that we hear a lot. If you're desperate, like maybe a Jonnu Smith, he had that one game where he came out and kind of balled, but since then he's fallen off the radar. Someone's probably, if we get Evan Ingram and Rhett Ellison out again. Did you play any Caden Smith in DFS last week?
No, I pretty much played 100% to Tyler Higbee.
Okay. I mean, Caden Smith was somebody who had a solid line, especially for somebody who, he's probably only still at this point like 2% owned. Last week against Green Bay, he put up 6 for 70. So, if obviously he's only in play if both of those tight ends are out, and that's what he's had for the past 2 weeks. So, that's you are not upset about 6 for 70 whatsoever for a tight end ever. Even the week before, I think he only had 17 yards, but he had a touchdown. So, as far as Higbee goes, if we do get him without Gerald Everett, Seahawks are giving up the second most fantasy points per game to the tight end position, and Everett had himself a really solid game whenever they played earlier this year. Everett went 7 for 136. So again, even if he comes back, you got to figure he's going to be at least a little bit limited, especially with what they saw that Higbee did last week. So I wouldn't be in a rush to play either of them if Everett is playing. But if he's not, I think Higbee is somebody that we could go back to.
Yeah, and if you have him and, some of these other guys are gone, like, Gesicki's been picked up, Goddard's gone. Some of those guys are already off the board. Ryan Griffin, then sure. I think you could definitely run it back with Tyler Higbee again this week. The matchup is there. Opportunity is going to be there. So it's just tough because I think there's a lot of tight ends that are kind of in similar situations this week that have changed things up, especially with like a guy like Austin Hooper coming back who hopefully people stashed, because now this is the perfect time for him to come back, because if you own him and you're in the playoffs, you couldn't ask for a better time, because like I said, he's still tied in 5, I believe, despite the fact that he's missed, I think, 3 straight weeks. So anyways, yeah, I think I do like that call though, with Tyler Higbee, and I think a lot of people are going to be running out to add him this week that probably did not play him last week, which we talk about every week. But do you think, what are your thoughts on Vance McDonald, especially for a team that does not want to run or does not want to throw the ball very much? It's hard to imagine he's going to get how many opportunities he's really going to get, but where do you stand on someone like him?
He's so hard to trust. Like, even if the Steelers were throwing the ball more, like, he just hasn't been able to get himself, that cemented of a role in that offense. But it is the flow chart. It is Arizona. Maybe with Duck Hodges back there, the Steelers are going to be more willing to kind of just let him throw it down the field than they were with Mason Rudolph. But like I said, he's 50% owned in Yahoo leagues. Somebody just looked up Higbee. Higbee is only 11% owned. I think Noah Fant still might be lesser owned across Yahoo leagues than Vance McDonald. So, I think I'd rather take the chance on Noah Fant, even though obviously the matchup against the Texans, I think the Texans have been pretty solid against the tight end position. I think I'd still rather go with somebody like Kyle Rudolph or Noah Fant than I would with Vance. He's just too hard to trust, and especially if Juju returns this week, that's obviously just going to take even more away from him, and he hasn't. So like last week, 3 targets, 21 yards.
Sure, but what I will say is, if you kind of look at his numbers, he's only had 2 big games this year, or really only 2 games over double digit fantasy points. Week 9 against Indy, he had 14, and he finished tight end 7. And then week 2 against Seattle, he went 7 for 38 and 2 touchdowns. Finished as number 3 tight end, 22.8 that game. But if you look, and most of it just basically kind of correlates with what kind of game it is and where they stand, because last week the things that are encouraging for him is his snap share. He's played at least 90% of the snaps each of the last 4 games that he's played. He is still running quite a bit of routes. He ran 33 against week 10 against the Rams. He ran 32 against Cleveland, 19, and then 17, which these last 2 games, they didn't really have to throw the ball very much because they kind of controlled the clock, controlled the game a little bit. If you go back to the game against Cleveland where they trailed, he did run 30. He ran 32 routes that week, had 7 targets. Same thing against LA where they were behind, 7 targets, and against Indy where they were behind, 7 targets. Games that are competitive that they have to kind of keep close are the games that you really want to target him, just because of game flow. If the Rams if the Cardinals are able to get up top, it's hard not to. We've seen some of the tight ends that have went off against the Cardinals this year. Ross Dwelly had a monster game against them. Ross fucking Dwelly, it's so. I think Vance McDonald's in play, especially for tight ends, and like I said, if the guys that if a Tyler Higbee's out there, yeah, I'd probably rather have Tyler Higbee, just because I think it's a higher scoring game. I think it's a better game to target. So I would probably rather have Tyler Higbee than Vance McDonald. But I do think that Vance McDonald should be viewed as a tight end 1 this week because of the matchup.
Oh yeah, just based off the matchup, he's definitely in play. Like I said, I would rather play somebody like Fant. I'm Higbee, Ryan Griffin. I would rather play Dallas Goedert, even as a second tight end in that offense. I'd rather play. we just don't know what we're gonna have with that Steelers offense yet. But I mean, if he's your best option, then yeah, by all means plug him in, because there's no better bet for a tight end to score a touchdown than against the Cardinals.
Yeah. I don't know. We'll have to see, because it was weird, because even last week for Noah Fant, like they were targeting Jeff Howerman far more than they were Noah Fant. Like Noah Fant only had he only had 3 targets last week. Did have one red zone one red zone, but he only ran 17 routes, 15 routes the week before that. And with Drew Lock, like he just, I don't know, like they're obviously going to try to now, the difference between last week, though, and this week, I think that should be mentioned, is the fact that they're going to have to throw the ball, because, playing Houston, I don't think that, especially I believe this game's on the road in Houston. So I do think that Houston's going to be able to kind of get up early and quickly in this game. So I think game script is going to be one where they're going to have to throw the ball a lot more. So I do think you kind of see him get back to, running more routes, similar to what we kind of saw in Minnesota, where he ran 35 routes, had 11 targets, 4 for 60 in that game. So, and he has somebody that is explosive. We saw the week before where he had that 75-yard touchdown against Cleveland. So, but other than that, like he basically had the one game against Cleveland, and then he had the 9.3, which was okay against Minnesota. But you have to go all the way back to week 4, where he had 11.1, but that was off a touchdown. He had 2 for 31 and a touch. Other than that, like he's been really pretty much non-existent this year.
As always, it's just an ugly position group.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's a tight end. Yeah. I mean, so I mean, I think you could play him if you absolutely had to. But I just I would rather play a McDonald than him. I would rather play Higbee than him. I would rather play like a Jacob Hollister, or hell, I'd even rather play OJ Howard than him. I would probably rather play I would definitely rather play Gesicki and Griffin and Rudolph over him. So I'm just not super high on Noah Fant myself this week. For reference, I have Noah Fant ranked at 18th.
It's been a bad tight end year when you say, hell, I'd even play OJ Howard over Noah. Like that is the point that we are at.
It's kind of crazy though to think about though with OJ Howard, because I mean the hype train was real for him.
Oh yeah, he was routinely the 4th, 5th, 6th tight end taken this year at the beginning of the year. It's probably like a 5th, 6th round pick.
Yeah, for sure. He was right there with Hunter Henry. He was right there in that range.
If we only knew now what we knew then.
I know, printing all the money, just all the monies.
Just wait until round 11 and take Austin Hooper, and then round 16 take Darren Waller for whenever Austin Hooper got hurt.
I mean, I don't want to be like humble brag, because like no one wants to hear that, but like I'm pretty sure. I mean, that's what we were hammering all offseason was the Austin Hoopers. Just forget everybody else and just draft out. Now there is something that said that he did get hurt for a couple of weeks, so but that doesn't matter. I mean, we were spot on with Austin Hooper. I remember we talked about it all offseason, like how in the fuck is Austin Hooper going in the 11th, 12th, 13th round? Like the year before, he had what was it, like 70-some receptions or something like that last year? Like there was no reason he ever should have been going that low ever. He should have been like the 6th, 7th tight end. Remember Vance McDonald. Now, of course, we didn't know that Big Ben was going to get hurt and everything else. Who knows how things would have turned out with this offense had Big Ben stayed healthy. But that dude won. Big Ben, I mean, hopefully he gets a nutritionist by the time next season comes, because that dude looks rather large right now.
He is now Big Ben.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I know he's, obviously can't play, but you'd think he'd at least try to, you think he'd be rehabbing and stuff right now, right? Like, is he not rehabbing yet?
I mean, hey man, come on. That's the elbow he hurt. You definitely can't get on a treadmill or an elliptical whenever your elbow's hurt. So let's take it easy on this professional athlete.
That is true. That is true. The old Big Ben, but no, it's been a fun year. I'm kind of looking forward to kind of doing the old rewind, kind of go back and just kind of look at some of our takes. Obviously, over the off season we had like Anthony, who's no longer on the pot, with us. He's doing his own thing, but we all had a bunch of takes and everything else. But I feel like I pretty much nailed my takes that I can remember. Outside of the David Johnson one, I will say that did not work out. I still have it pinned, I think, on my Twitter account at FantasyRat13 that David Johnson is going to finish the tight end 5, but I'm not going to take it down. I'm not going to be one of those people that run for my take that just because. But I'll just say this: that he was RB5 prior to getting hurt, and then it all just came. I would really like to know. Hopefully, they tell us at the end of the year what in the fuck is going on with David Johnson, because it doesn't make any sense to me, and they don't even talk about it. Nothing. It's just like dead silence out of really your high paid running back is just over there chilling on the bench now and getting the scraps. Is just the cleanup running back after they're just getting their ass beat. Then he gets a few. Then they throw him a few touches.
I do not get it. Yeah, hopefully that's one of those things where at the end of the year he was a lot more banged up than what we knew, or maybe he just ends up getting traded so they don't have to eat that contract, because when Kenyon Drake comes in is what they gave up a fifth for him, and they're just. That's wild, man. It's wild to see.
Running back's going to be really interesting next year because you're going to have like Kevin, we were talking about Kareem Hunt. More than likely, is going to be a free agent. I mean, he is a free agent, but I can't imagine the Browns do something stupid and re-sign him. But they could. You never know. But I think he'll be available. Melvin Gordon, if he doesn't return with the Chargers, which is a possibility, so you have both of them that will be available. You have. I think David Johnson very well possibly could be available next year and through trade or release. I don't think they're going to release. They own way too much money. That's too big of a cap hit. I think there's a better opportunity that they were to trade him. So maybe somebody like Tampa or Atlanta. Could you imagine him in Atlanta with Matt Ryan and that offense and all the pieces they have there? God, that would be sexy. They spent, among the offensive line. So that would be a good landing spot. But, you have him. I think Le'Veon Bell is going to become available through trade. They clearly hate him. And so I think he's somebody that they look to maximize. And then you also have this rookie draft coming up with, we talked about it a little bit earlier with like DeAndre Swift, Travis Etienne, Jonathan Taylor. Like there's some pretty solid backs coming in next year too. So, I'm kind of interested to see kind of what happens because I think there's going to be a lot of movement among running backs next year. And I think it's going to be one of the things to really kind of, plant your flag in next year on, who you're going with, because I think we're going to have a lot of movement.
Yeah, it's gonna, like you touched on. There's gonna be a lot of incoming talent. There's gonna be movement just among the guys who already have jobs, and just gonna be interesting to see what teams are gonna have the openings.
Yeah, like Kansas City is 100%, no doubt about it, in the market for a running back. Like you can book it, take it to the bank, do whatever you want with it. I know people are going to be wanting to probably like figure that they want to play, or they're going to, you're going to hear people say, oh, they're going to try to trade for Le'Veon Bell or David Johnson or something like that. I don't see it happening because Pat Mahomes is entering that year where he is going to break the bank. I wish he would be cool and just be like, kind of like a Tom Brady move. Like, I'm only going to take 20 so we can keep building this thing, but we know it's not going to happen. He is going to ask for that 40+ million, and he rightfully so deserves it. So that's coming. So I think it's definitely through the draft. I think you have a much better opportunity to see them go after one of these running backs that are through the draft. And that guy is going to shoot up once that happens.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, that whatever running back Kansas City spends, even in the second round with the amount of talent that's going to be coming in this draft, you can expect that they'll be in the top 2 or 3 of every single rookie ranking list. I mean, obviously depending on all the other landing spots, but yeah, whatever running back ends up in Kansas City is already a lock for a top 2, top 3 ranking list.
No, for sure. Okay, so we got a few more questions. We'll answer these real quick. We already hit on all of our tight ends that we want to talk about, so we'll answer some of these questions. Brandon Cooks or Bo Scarborough or half PPR last flex spot. For me, with it being Scarborough, that's a terrible matchup against the Vikings, on the ground. So he's not involved as a pass catcher there. It's got to be Brandon Cooks.
Yeah, I got to go Cooks there.
Even though it's tough to trust him because he just hasn't been really, utilized. I mean, last week, how many targets did Robert Woods have last week? Like 20?
I think he had 19.
Yeah, just insane target share there. So, Brandon Cooks is kind of the third and fourth option right now, or even the fifth option. So, but I do think with it being, a half PPR and everything else, considering I would probably still prefer a Brandon Cooks.
Yeah, I mean, all Cooks needs is just have one play. And one play, he can outscore Bo Scarborough.
The next one from a boy, Alcos. This is a tough one. Now, this is a true tough one. Matt Ryan, James Winston, or Tannehill. Like, I have all of them very, very close in my rankings.
For me, it's either Ryan or Winston. I would have Tannehill third out of that group. Do you have a strong leaning between Ryan or Winston? That honestly, is a tough call.
I think based purely off upside, and I think what could be in this game, I think it would be Ryan. But it's tough because Winston, we know that they cannot run the football and they have to throw. So, I don't know. It's pretty close, but I think just off everything, I think this is what it's going to come down to. If Julio plays, which sounds like he's going to, and Hooper plays, it's Ryan, and it's not close. If they don't play, or if Julio's out, or if both of them are out, it would probably pretty easily be Winston for me because I think you drop him down far enough that I think then Winston would definitely be the play for me.
Yeah, because the Colts are giving up the 5th fewest half PPR points per game to running backs. So, I mean, it's not like the Bucs really have a strong running game to begin with. So I think right now, knowing what we know, I'll go Winston too. But I really don't think you can go wrong with either of those guys.
No, I have all three of them, I think, in my top 10. So. In my rankings, which you can find the rankings, by the way, over at thefantasyauthority.com. I think it's right there on the homepage. Next question is Tyreek Hill or Kenny Golladay. This one's easy for me. I have Tyreek Hill as my number one wide receiver this week.
Oh, you have him at number one. Did you put that in there as like a feeling a little spicy?
No. I just think that, like I said, with everything I feel like with Pat Mahomes this week, but Tyreek, I'm not worried. Really, I know people are going to say, yeah, but the Patriots are going to try to take away Tyreek Hill and blah 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 blah, right? But we've seen Tyreek Hill. Was it last year or the year before where he went out and dropped the 3 touchdowns against them? There's nobody. He cannot be really taken out of the game. There's so many different things they can do with him. They get creative with using him. I'm not worried. Gilmore cannot shut down Tyreek Hill. He can't hang with Tyreek Hill because Tyreek Hill and his speed and everything else. I'm not worried about the Patriots defense in this matchup against the Chiefs. I'm just not. I don't think the Patriots defense is as good as what everyone thought that it was. It's easy to do what you do whenever you're playing against, bad teams. I'm not saying I think their defense is terrible by any means, but it's not this elite squad that I think everybody thought that it was. And it's not just recency bias coming off the game against the Texans. I've kind of thought that all year, but I just like this matchup. And I think this game could end up being one of the highest, if not the highest scoring. And if that's the case, then I think you have to feel pretty solid that Tyreek Hill is involved in that. So that's why I have him at number 1.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like I said, we've seen the Patriots defense. They're not the best defense in the league, but big games from Tyreek before, and I mean even with Gilmore, Andy Reid's smart enough that he's gonna be able to scheme some things up where he's putting Tyreek in motion and then running him out of the slot and everything else. So like I don't. That's one where I don't think that like we can kind of be led astray by receiver and quarterback matchups. But yeah, I'll go Tyreek on that one as well. The David, did we ever figure out, is it Blau? David Blow?
Yeah, it's Blau.
That started off pretty nice last week, but then they were held to like 3 points in the second half or something like that. So give me Patty Mahomes over the third string quarterback.
Well, is he even playing this week? Are they going back to Driscoll?
I thought Driscoll was on. Didn't they put him on IR?
Did they?
I think they did.
That'd be wild because he was available last week. He was the emergency quarterback last week.
Maybe I'm completely wrong. I might be making things up. No, he's on IR. They signed Kyle Sloter.
That's wild. Because he was available last week to play. Because they were, I remember them talking about that he was the available to play for emergency. So yeah, I did not see that news. So okay, well we don't have to worry about that. So, anyways, all right. But yeah, I think we both agreed on that. The next question: Drizzy Drake, 38, Sam Darnold, Jacoby Brissett, or Andy Dalton.
First of all, I am honored to have Drake listening in on our stream and asking us questions, man. So props. Thank you very much, Drizzy. Darnold.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. Same with me. I think it's pretty easy on that one for me. As much as I loved Andy Dalton is the GOAT. But I did see that they brought him back this week, and he didn't just get the win, but he also set the franchise record for touchdowns with 198 as well. So
yeah, big day for the brand.
It was. So yeah, but it's definitely Darnold for me. Like I said, I have him as a QB1. The other two I have much further down the list. So, and then looks like we have one more: Wentz or Cousins. This is also a close one, but I would go Cousins in this matchup.
I would go Wentz.
All right.
Sorry, we couldn't help you.
We could battle it out like to death, like a team, like a death match of who. I just think for me on my side, I just think Cousins, fantastic matchup. Not that Wentz isn't in a great matchup, but with that being a more of a divisional game, I think those games typically are played closer. And I don't know. I just feel a little bit better about Cousins. Cousins has been a baller. I know some people might try to blame Kirk Cousins for what happened yesterday against the Seahawks, but none of that was on him. He played great that entire game. I hated the play call that fourth and short. That was a terrible play call by Minnesota. But overall, like Cousins played fantastic. And if they get Adam Thielen back, which they've been missing him back into this offense, like this offense is going to get scary. And so yeah, it's definitely Cousins against the Lions. I know this is also a divisional matchup, but the Lions' pass defense has been just terrible. And so I just, like I said, if they get Thielen back, which I definitely think Thielen is back this week, it's just hard not to play Cousins. Like I think that he's like a top five option.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't blame for picking Cousins, but for me, Wentz in that matchup, like same thing I touched on earlier. They need these wins. It's not like the Giants are that much better or worse of a matchup for than compared to Detroit. And I mean, we have seen some of the times where Darius Slay does decide he wants to be a shutdown corner again. I mean, those have kind of been few and far between, but Alshon was back and looked healthy, and he put up his big numbers last week. So, and you would think that with Ertz playing last week and escaping without injuring that hamstring any further, that he should be a little bit healthier as well. So, again, one of those options where kind of like the Winston Matt Ryan discussion we were having, can't really go wrong either with either of those choices. I just prefer Wentz and his matchup to Cousins and his.
Would you try to pick up Darwin Thompson on waivers and start over Bo or Cooks? No. We were listening earlier when we talked about this with Darwin Thompson. I don't think Darwin Thompson's all of a sudden going to be the lead back. It's not happening. I don't think he even gets as many opportunities as people think they do. They went out and signed Spencer Ware today, which is very familiar with this offense. And so I do not see that happening. I think Spencer Ware steps right in and gets opportunities. They also have Elijah McGuire on their practice squad. So, I mean, there's plenty of backs there. And I don't think, I mean, Darwin Thompson, people have to remember too, that all came in garbage time. It was the last drive of the game. It was like a 9-minute drive that they had to end the game. That's where all that most all of that opportunity came from. And this matchup against I think he's going to get some opportunities, but it's not going to be enough to justify playing him. He's not going to be the lead back. LeSean McCoy is still going to get plenty of opportunities. I think Spencer Ware will get opportunity. And so Darwin Thompson is just not going to have a ton of opportunities. And I do think the Chiefs are going to have to throw the ball. And so with that, like there's just not enough there to play Darwin Thompson. Sure, he could get some get to be targeted out of the backfield as a pass catcher and find some big plays that way. But right now, like I would rather play Brandon Cooks.
Yeah, and also don't forget if Damian Williams comes back and does play. I think there was a report that came out that said he has a chance to play. If Damian Williams is back, this is all a conversation for no reason.
Yeah, because then it's even more. If he came back, there's the opportunity that they could. I mean, they're not going to roll out 4 running backs in this game. So either Spencer Ware gets cut and that was a 1-week thing, or if Damian Williams is out, then it's still Spencer Ware is there. So I don't know. Like people, like I kind of talked about, I think a little bit of the hype is a little bit too much for Darwin Thompson, especially for Week 14 playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, if we got the news that Daryl and Damian were both put like on IR or something, I would be more excited for Darwin Thompson. Like you said, Spencer Ware, it's not like he hasn't been in this offense already for, I mean, multiple seasons, at least one full season. So that's, like I said, if Damian comes back, and I mean, if it's not this week, it's going to be next week. More than likely, that sends Darwin straight back to the bench.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think that's kind of what they view him as. I don't right now. It doesn't seem like, because even after the game when they talked about it, like Andy Reid just didn't really give him like much encouragement. And so like it wasn't like oh yeah, I think that that it wasn't like a ringing endorsement. It was, he talked about his size and him being a little bit smaller. But he was impressed with some of the things that he did, talked about his work ethic and everything else. So I don't know. Like I wouldn't trust it, especially Week 14. Like I would have to be super desperate to play Darwin Thompson. This just isn't the week to do it. So Allen Robinson or Keelan Allen, I think that's a pretty good one. But for me, it's Allen Robinson. He's just, it's as crazy as it sounds. There's just more opportunities there for Keelan Allen to not get out. I mean, with LA, with the Chargers and the way, as bad as they look, I mean, they just lost to the Broncos. Holy shit. And as bad as, with Mike Williams there and Hunter Henry, and if he doesn't find the end zone, I just worry about him as a whole. And I just think Allen Robinson, we know he's the alpha in that offense, is getting all the opportunities. So I would not want to sit him.
Yeah, that's just one of those scenarios where, as bad as that offense has been, as bad as Trubisky's been, A-Rob is still putting you up, at worst, wide receiver kind of 2 numbers. And I mean, there's been legit chatter about Tyrod Taylor taking over for Phillip Rivers. And if that's something that happens like in the middle of a game, like you don't want to be dealing with that. So I'll go A-Rob as well. Looks like we got another one. Would you start Devin Singletary or Kareem Hunt? I will go Hunt there. Matchup based.
I would actually probably go Devin Singletary here. It's tough. It's close, I think. But I don't love the matchup, but I do think that the fact that with it being a game where I think that that Buffalo is going to have to kind of play keep up. I think that helps Devin Singletary in getting targets. And so I think I would just rather play Singletary. I think he gets more opportunities, and it kind of looks like he's taking over as a lead back. So I think I would lean towards Singletary there. So Mostert or Madison, it's Raheem for me for sure, especially after the matchup coming off of with Dalvin Cook sounding like he's perfectly okay. Madison may only see the ball 4 or 5 times in this game, but then again, if they're able to build a big lead in this game, you could easily see Madison get more opportunity.
If this was a waiver question, would you still roll Raheem, or if this is a waiver question, would you pick up Madison over Raheem?
That's tough because, like I said, we only have a couple weeks left. So it's not like we have so much time left. But of course, with seeing what's going on with Dalvin Cook and him getting hurt, but it sounds like it really wasn't as bad as what we thought it was. It sounds like it may have just been a re-injury of a sprain that he had. Against Dallas, I think it was. Of course, Madison, I think, is the one that has the most upside, and he does have some standalone value. But let me put it this way: like, we don't have the opportunity to really worry about what's going to happen next week. So you have to win this week to be able to keep playing. So if I had to pick one for just like to play, it would be Mostert.
Yeah, I agree. If this is a start set Mostert, if it's waiver, I still think I'd go Madison.
No, for sure. Yeah. So I think we're in agreement there. So either way, I think that's it. I think we got all the questions. I appreciate everybody and all the questions. We appreciate it every single week. We all always are like, oh yeah, we're gonna try to wrap this up in an hour and a half, and here we are at over 2 hours. But we always want to try to answer all the questions. We appreciate you guys watching and checking it out. If you guys could please hit that like button, that thumbs up, it helps us out, and subscribe if you can. If you're on YouTube, it really helps us out. We're trying to do a lot of things like we've talked about multiple times, but we got a lot of fun stuff we're gonna try to do over the off season with the draft, doing some profiles, some dynasty stuff.
Yeah.
Breaking down all those guys, maybe do a live NFL draft show, which would be a lot of fun, and have a bunch of alcohol and drinks and just drink and watch the NFL draft and kind of break it down. What could go wrong there? I don't know. But anyway, and if you're into DFS and you want to check it out, we do the DFS DJ Nation podcast. We'll be doing that one tomorrow night. That was a lot of fun. If you never played DFS, check it out. Go ahead and throw in $20 on DraftKings, FanDuel. Play really light, have some fun with it. If you kicked out of the playoff, because especially playoff DFS is a lot of fun. Playoff football is a lot because it's much more concentrated. It's easier to tell where things are going. A couple little plays here and there could make a big difference. So, So like I said, go check that out there. We will be putting this out on the podcast through whether it's Apple, Stitcher, we're on Spotify. Pretty much everywhere where the podcast we are on there as well. So we appreciate all the feedback and the comments and everything else and everything that you guys are doing. We really appreciate it. And last but not least, if you want to join our Slack chat, we do have that going as well. And we run DFS listener leagues every single week, and those have been fun. And with the Dynasty coming up, we have a Dynasty channel where if you want to jump in there and talk Dynasty, if you're in any Dynasty leagues. Old Hedge Life, Cody's our big Dynasty guy, so I'm sure he can help you out there.
For sure, looking forward to it, man. So it's getting to be about that time. We were talking about it before we started recording that it's a grind. It's week 14, and as soon as that ends, you already messaged me asking about running backs coming in for the 2020 class, man. So it's going to be fun. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, it happens really quickly. So anyways, like I said, I appreciate everybody tuning in and checking it out. Please hit that like and subscribe, and we will be back again next week to do the same thing. Hopefully everybody gets that W. If you play DFS, again, check out the DFS DJ Nation. But let's get that W this week. Let's keep it moving and get them championship, win that championship money. All right. Have a great week, and we will see you all again next week. Peace.